Welcome, everyone. Make sure you have what you need to be comfortable, whether you're at home or here in the room together, so that you'll be able to sit for about 30 minutes. And we often begin our Sunday morning practice group with some chanting, and lately we've been doing this seclusion with the divine abidings, this at least a common chant here at our city center. Usually we chant it every morning for those who come to the building for the morning set. And some of you chant it also online if you come to the 6:30 online set. And, like anything, things can turn into habits, even something that's dear to our heart, our meditation practice and the chant we do at the beginning. So it's nice, however that's going to happen, just to have a fresh attitude, a fresh awareness, hear the words. Whether you're chanting out loud or just listening, just let the words have their impact. You don't have to think about the words, but we're practicing actually being there when the words, whether it's our own voicing of the words or we're just hearing them, but when we're letting them land and have their effect on the mind, on the heart. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And for those of you online, you can find it in the document that I've been putting into the chat. You can open up that document and you'll see this chant, the 4 quarters chant, sometimes we call it. Now let us make the 4 boundless qualities shine forth. I will abide, pervading 1 quarter, with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1 quarter, with a mind imbued with compassion. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility, without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1 quarter, with a mind imbued with goodness. Likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with equanimity, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. And we take the time, if you haven't already, feeling at home right here, right in the middle, this embodied life we have. And most importantly, doing the best we can to feel whatever's here to feel. Not afraid to be a sensitive human being. Softening, widening, including. And little by little, in a way that feels safe, we shed some of the armor, some of the callousness and defendedness that we think we need to get by in our lives. We're not forcing anything. We're just seeing whether we can embody this receptivity, this open, sensitive presence. And we just begin by feeling the body sitting, keeping the body in mind. And of course, we're going to feel compelled to think about this and that, to worry, to imagine, to analyze. These habits, thinking habits, let's call them, they will have a lot of momentum, of course, in the mind. So they're going to express, the momentum will express itself as that inclination to plan, to worry, to analyze, to compare, etc. So have a lot of patience, a sense of humor. But don't believe the thought that I have to think about this now, or worry about this now, or judge this now. We're training our heart in a new habit, which is this not wanting to forget that sitting, that having a body is like this. And that fresh and immediate, direct sense. And although it's really simple, and the mind, the thinking mind, will assess it as being ordinary or not significant, we use the body, or some of you will use the breath moving in the body as an essential anchor. It's a training. And we're choosing to break the spell, the mind's addiction, obsession with whatever it's thinking about, and getting identified with those thoughts. And thinking about this and that leads somewhere, leads to some real safety or to some pleasure that's significant, when in fact, generally it just makes the mind and body tight. Thinking about this and that from this place of attachment to thought, identification with thought. So as a counter to those very deep habits to be lost in thought, we're cultivating a new habit to be interested in the experience of embodiment. Whether you're more specifically feeling that natural process of breathing in and out, or you're more generally feeling the body sitting and all that's here in this inclusive sense of the body. You can just choose whether you want the more specific anchor of the breathing process or the more general anchor of the whole body sitting. But either way, we're training the mind in a new wholesome habit, being intimate, keeping in mind and being intimate with what is essentially pretty ordinary. Feeling the body sitting, feeling what's here to feel in the body that's sitting, feeling the totality of that. Or if you prefer, more specifically, just feel that process of breathing in, feeling the process of breathing out. In either case, whether you're using the breath as your anchor or the whole body as your anchor, we're using the anchor to keep the present moment in mind, to not forget. To not forget that this is being felt, this is being known. And as a counterweight to the habit of getting lost, identified with thoughts. Don't worry about the thoughts, just let them be there in the background, whatever they're doing. It's just the expression of habit, and that's okay. But cultivate an interest with one of the two anchors. Choose or intend to be interested, to want to connect, to want to sustain this receptive, soft presence, this sensitivity that feels the breath coming in and going out, or feels whatever's here to feel in the sitting body. And the sustaining is just learning that we can keep it in mind through the process of being interested. We can keep the body or keep the process of breathing in mind. It's the effort of not forgetting. But it doesn't require a lot of willfulness. It can be really gentle, this effort to be interested, to be receptive and sensitive. And in this way, we're just going to track the process of breathing in and out, or track the flow of sensation, track the experience of embodiment, just as it actually is. And we don't need a different breath or a different experience of the body. This one is fine. And then finally, if and when distractions arise, if it's a relatively weak distraction, just let it happen there in the background. But if something arises and the attention goes to that something, some little drama, some big drama, then our practice is to simply acknowledge what the mind is doing, what the mind is knowing. And to be interested, well, what's it feel like? What's the underlying feeling with this drama? Whatever the mind is involved with, identified with. So you can even ask that question silently in your mind. What's the feeling here? Can I feel whatever the feeling is? And remember that sometimes the feeling is a numbness. That's also a feeling to feel. And in this practice, feeling the underlying feeling is as important as anything. Being receptive, being open, and knowing it feels like this now. Can this be okay to be feeling this? And you'll notice that there's less stickiness with the distractions when we're honestly willing to feel what's there to feel. We're not on the level, the cognitive level of the thought about this or that. We have this more inclusive sense, oh, it feels like this. Having these thoughts, this worry, whatever it is, it feels like this. Here, now in the body, energetically, it feels like this. There's more integrity when we're willing to feel what's here to feel. So now let's continue in silence. or as a skillful means for exploring this training where the mind is learning to connect and sustain attention, present moment awareness with the anchor, learning how to be interested and to sustain that interest, to keep it in mind, and noticing the effect that that has and the kind of pleasure that arises. So letting this be the most important thing, and even curious about what gets in the way of keeping the anchor in mind. So the anchor of the body or the anchor of the breath. Remembering that awareness of the anchor, the meditation anchor, is a way to be intimate with the totality of the present moment. It's not a way to escape. It's a way to come into the moment, feeling the wholeness, the inclusiveness of the present moment. And take a little time, adjust your body as you need to, so you're comfortable. Nice to see everybody here today. I want to welcome Orapan, who's been living out of town for the last 10 years, long time now, visiting from Mexico. Nice to have you in the room again. Nice to have all of you online and all of you here in person. Really grateful that Deborah Heltzer spoke last week, a good friend of mine and teaching colleague of mine. And some of you were wondering about some of the passages that Deborah read in last Sunday's talk, and Robin has made a Google document, and the link for that is on our web, on the calendar for this event, but they're the quotes from last week. So if you're interested in those, you can just check our public calendar for the Sunday morning program, and you'll see that link. And when I've been giving talks in June, on Sunday, I've been reflecting on the nature of the mind. A couple weeks ago, I asked the question, what do Buddhists mean by the mind? Because, we use that word mind or heart. Chitta is the Pali phrase or word. And what do we mean by the mind? And what do we mean by awareness? And how are those two things related? And today I'd like to talk about some aspect of the mind. Because, the mind we tend to know is the mind that is caught up in thinking about this or that. Right? So we're aware that the mind is thinking about this, or obsessing about this, or wondering about this. So that's the mind we know. And one way to get to know our minds, because the point of this theme that I have been talking about, I'll probably continue through much of July talking about this, the nature of the mind, nature of awareness. The real way to find out about the mind isn't for me to tell you or for you to read, or it's to take up some different activities that will reflect back to you the nature of your own mind, right? So that's often how we learn about things, like even your relationship with a good friend or a partner, go take a trip together. And then all of a sudden you learn about the nature of the relationship, or make a commitment to each other. Or do the opposite. Say you're going to have an open relationship, and all of a sudden, just what unfolds is a way of mirroring back the nature of that thing. And it's the same thing with the mind and awareness. If we want to get to know what is the nature of the mind? What is the nature of awareness? And I'm not saying they're the same thing. Well, we undertake some experiments. And one of the very common and useful experiments to take up is to ask this particular part of the mind that pays attention, to ask it to pay attention to something in a more exclusive way. So, honey, I want you to pay attention to this, the felt sense of the body sitting, or if you're doing walking meditation, that felt sense of lifting the foot and placing the foot and lifting the foot and placing the foot. So something ordinary, something that the sensitive mind, the sensitive heart is completely capable of doing. Right? It isn't hard, complicated for what we call the mind to be sensitive to walking or to breathing in or breathing out or feeling the body sitting. Right? That's not a hard task. It gets harder when we ask the mind to sustain that interest. Keep it in mind. Because then it comes with a real cost. Do you mean I can't do what I normally do? I mean, it's that's really, in a sense, what the habits of the mind say back to itself. It's like, wait a minute, I want to speculate about this, or think about that, or imagine, or fantasize, or compare, or analyze, or, my mind wants to do all those things that it's habitually, drawn to do. Because that's what that part of the mind that thinks. It's just a series, overlapping patterns or habits, inclinations, right? To worry, to plan, to analyze, to compare, to speculate about the future, or regurgitate the past. These are just tendencies that have been built up through repetition. And that one of those tendencies is to take all of that personally. So then when we ask the mind to attend to something simple like that felt sense of sitting, or that felt sense of breathing in and breathing out, all of a sudden there's a lot of pushback, because now we get to see the habits of the mind, to want to analyze, to want to judge, to want to doubt, to want to plan, because you're giving it a task, and it's the pushback that is a way of revealing the nature of the mind to itself. Oh, look at that. The mind, interestingly, the mind really doesn't want to stay with the ordinary experience of sitting, feeling the body sitting. It can even feel, maybe you even felt that this morning, it can feel like I'm going to die or I'm going to explode if I don't let my mind do what it's inclined to do. And the other, even more interesting than the kind of wholehearted pushback that can arise, like that sort of teenage, no, I'm not going to do what you're asking me to do, is the more sly moves the mind begins. So you're seemingly aware of the breath going in and aware of the breath going out with some apparent continuity, or maybe with the whole body as your anchor. So it doesn't really matter. And you could use hearing too, by the way, as an anchor. Just hearing whatever there is to hear. So you're not trying to hear particular sounds, but whatever that hearing sensitivity is sensitive to, just know that hearing is happening, and keeping that in mind. That could be a third training anchor. And generally, just to make this point, choose one, right? So your mind knows what anchor you're training in. And then over time, you're really making that a good friend, a really good friend. Like awareness, the mind that is paying attention, learns to like paying attention to that. I don't know if this is true, but I'm told that at least some types of dogs and maybe other animals, it's like when they don't have freedom, they like to be in their enclosed space, right? And we have, as humans, similar things. It's like if there are too many possibilities, it's stressful. And it's kind of, we like our routines, things to be set. So in a way, that's partly what we want the anchor for. One is, it provides a kind of safety and wholeness, and I'll talk about that in a minute, the pleasure that comes with training with an anchor. And then the other I've just spoken about is how that training exposes the mind, the nature of the mind, the habits of the mind to itself in a way that we're going to be less able to see them without that training. It's not so different than when you go to work. If you have a job, especially jobs that require a kind of attentiveness, the mind staying on task, it's just getting interested in like all the ways the mind leaves the task. And just what that's about. And it's not about judging, and it's actually not about control. It's, the way I'm talking about it, it's like, I just want to, whatever this activity, the mind is kind of, has both the nature of activity, mental activity, but it also seems like it has this nature of space, the space of the heart, or the space of the knowing mind, right? So it has two maybe somewhat distinct qualities, like mental activity, what the mind is doing, and there also seems to be like the space of the knowing mind that's here and now. And so we want to kind of unpack that experience of mind. So we take up a particular training, and then we have to really give ourselves to it. Like any sort of experiment, there needs to be a kind of integrity. So initially, that means we're going to borrow some confidence, because we won't have direct experience to give us confidence, but we're going to borrow some confidence from the Buddha, from our lineage, of teachers that tell us this is a really powerful training. This using some aspect of the present moment and train your mind, that particular part of the mind that pays attention, that connects, and then sustains that sensitivity with that experience. When you really do that, you're going to learn, all kinds of surprising and important things will arise for you. You'll learn something you don't know yet about the mind. And just the general two categories, you're going to learn something about the force of habit, like how powerful it is and how impersonal it is. And you're going to learn something about the inner pleasure, healing pleasure that can arise when you create the circumstances where the mind isn't just following its habits. A good friend of mine and one of my teachers, and somebody I also teach with now, Kamala Masters, she would tell the story sometimes about a dog at Insight Meditation Society, a place I've done a lot of practice and I teach out in Massachusetts, sort of a grandmother institution to common ground. And there's a wonderful 3.5 or so mile loop that a lot of the retreatants and teachers and staff people walk. It's really beautiful, New England woods, and quiet. There's most of it is not too many cars on it. And there's a particular place where there was a dog. I think the dog has passed away because this is long ago, but for many years I knew that dog just from my own being out there. And when you were walking, it felt obliged. It was a nice dog, didn't really bark much, but it would follow people. And then when someone was coming the other way, it would follow that person inevitably, because there's 100. The retreat center can hold 100 people, plus there's 30 or 40 staff people, and then a small handful of teachers. So that's a lot of people. Not everyone walks the loop, but a lot of people do. So there's a lot of that dog like feeling that obligation oh, I should follow this person. Oh, I should follow this person. And Kamala, especially as the dog started to get older, and little shaggy and decrepit and not so nimble. And finally, Kamala, if you don't know Kamala, she has this sort of very deep quality, kind of mother of the earth quality to her. And I think she was moved. And in that sort of fierce motherly way, stopped, looked at the dog, and said, "Sit." And the dog did. Kamala has this kind of fierce energy when she wants it. And the dog just was obedient. And the reason Kamala shares this story is like, what a relief to realize I don't have to just follow all this stuff. These people coming this way and people going that way. And we can pick that up in our pets and animals generally, including human animals, that sort of restlessness, that sense, that habitual sense, maybe even instinctual sense of having to follow everything in our environment, both our mental environments and our physical environments. Oh, what's that? Did you hear that? What's going on over there? Where'd you get that shirt? It's like everything that touches the sensitivity of eyes and ears and nose and tongue and body, the tactile experience and the thoughts we have about all of that sensuality, all that sense experience. And then to have habits that basically require the mind, that sense that the mind has an obligation, a responsibility to have an opinion, to have some idea or some whatever established thought about everything that we're sensing. You get a sense of how restless and uneasy all of that responsibility is for us. And that's why we like, closing our eyes and going to bed. Or, when it's overwhelming, we want to shut down in one way or another. We all have our ways of shutting down. And interestingly, because we'll do whatever works even a little, a lot of our ways of disconnecting from that obligation to the diversity of our sense experience is to focus on one thing. Because then we shut ourselves off from the totality of everything else, right? So we read a book, or we watch TV, or we, engage in a conversation with a friend, and we lose the bigger picture. And we feel good about that for a while. Or we take a walk, and we just absorb into the seeing and hearing of the natural environment. I mean, there's any number of relatively skillful, relatively unskillful ways that we get this pleasure of seclusion. And as a Buddhist practitioner, we want to get really wise about this particular skill. And I think we could even say, in terms of spiritual life, it's an essential skill to develop. And that's the skill of taking attention, using attention, like what we pay attention to direct awareness, right? So that intentional attending to some aspect of the present moment, so we can be aware, receptively aware. And the reason I'm distinguishing the attention from the awareness has very much an open and receptive quality to it. But when we're using a meditation object like an anchor, we call an anchor, we're paying attention to something. Of course, the mind's going to wander, but we have this intention to pay attention to this object. And that's a little more of an assertive aspect of the mind, that intention to pay attention, right? So that then we are open and receptive to what we're paying attention to. And this helps us understand the difference between connecting and sustaining present moment awareness. Because the connecting has more to do with that energy of attention, attending to something. And that's really about remembering, no, this is what I'm choosing to pay attention to. So there's that remembering of what I want the mind to attend to, what the mind has determined is important to keep in mind. So I'm going to begin again. I'm returning. And then we practice being receptive and open. And realizing that interest, what makes the present moment, even the breath, so even the anchor, or feeling the whole body, what makes it interesting is to let it be what it is. So it has to have that open, receptive, non-controlling, non-willful quality to it. Otherwise, we're going to get exhausted and frustrated and wonder what it's all about. And initially, like I've been saying, we need to borrow some confidence. Because we won't know initially, if you're relatively new in your practice, you won't know, like, what's the big deal about training my mind to attend, to connect, and sustain. Because, we don't do this forever in our practice. I mean, we always need the skill. It's not like we lose the need for the skill. But it's definitely not the only skill we're learning, right? Because this use of an exclusive meditation object, meditation anchor, is just to train the mind to learn what it can learn when we use an exclusive meditation anchor. Like the power of the habit to do it, the mind to do whatever it wants to do, pay attention to whatever it wants to pay attention. We want to see those habits, and we want to see that they're impersonal. Like, I really want to know what's going on over there. I want to open my eyes and look. Or I want to get up and walk away from my sit. Or I want to, just a little thought about tomorrow. Oh, I really want to figure this out about tomorrow. And it can feel very quickly like the most important thing in the universe. And the mind will feel so justified leaving behind something so stupid and ordinary like being intimate with the breath. And to realize it's basically calling the bluff, like, I know it seems like I'm going to die if I don't let the mind... No, but I'm going to keep saying yes to the meditation object. It's not so much about saying no to the distraction. It's really much, much more about saying yes to the meditation object. That's why I said, like, how can we make our meditation object our friend? And there are many, many, many of these meditation objects. Like the attitude of loving kindness is a really important meditation object to learn how to use. Patrice is going to be leading a retreat at the retreat center in the middle of August, just doing the loving kindness practice, where creative ways we're learning how to keep the attitude of kindness in mind all day long, not just during the sitting times for that retreat. And the mind starts to like keeping kindness in mind when you train that way. We also do it the first Friday of the month, which I'll be doing this coming Friday, and then Stacy McClendon and I switch off. So Stacy will do it in August. And then the third Friday of the month, Jean Haley and Jane Rawrenhouse do a self-compassion or related practice. So there's ways to learn that meditation object. Like, how do we keep compassion in mind? How do we keep kindness in mind? How do we keep joy in mind? That's what we do at these retreats and monthly practice groups. And sometimes at the Buddhist Studies course too, we do the loving kindness practices. So this is a skill. There's no way to be a human being. Like, to raise kids, you have to be able to keep your child in mind. Like you're doing whatever, Tinker Toys or Legos, there has to be an ability to connect and sustain. It's the same thing with, intimate relationships with another person. Obviously, Most of us, most of the time, don't do a great job. But at least in moments, we actually have to be there in that fresh, immediate way, and to sustain that fresh presence, really meeting the person. And it's really goes right to the heart of any kind of competence that we need in our lives. To be a good cook, to be a good caretaker of a pet, right? We have to be able to connect and sustain. And connecting and sustaining is so powerful. I mean, not to make it seem sort of otherworldly, but one of the imponderables that the Buddha talks about, things that you cannot conceive of, and one of them is the power of a concentrated mind, which is basically a mind that can connect and sustain awareness with things as they are, with the present moment, through a particular meditation object or in a more general way, whatever is predominant, moment by moment. But it's inconceivable how powerful. So we learn a lot even from short periods of time of connecting and sustaining. The whole world of whatever's going on in that moment opens up. Secrets cannot not be revealed when we connect and sustain present moment awareness. So if there's a situation in your life that is throwing you for a loop, seems really confusing, you seem caught up, then resolve to truly connect and sustain present moment awareness. And I think I can guarantee, I think the Buddha would say that you can be guaranteed that you will see what you're not seeing in that situation. That whatever it is that the mind has somehow been blocked from feeling, seeing, understanding, will have to yield those secrets when awareness is truly connecting and truly sustaining in that open, non-judging, non-willful way, that receptive way. Because awareness has the capacity, wisdom and awareness has the capacity to truly receive, to connect and receive the way it is. The whole shebang. And it isn't, we always think about this like, I'm going to figure out what the heck's going on in this particular situation. Like it would be some cognitive process that I'm going to analyze. But it's a different, whether you want to call it intuitive. In English, we don't really have a good word or phrase, maybe intuitive wisdom. In Buddhism, we call it vipassana or insight. It's a non-cognitive understanding that arises, cannot not arise when there's sustained openness, sustained present moment awareness. So experiment in different moments. And generally, the place to experiment initially is places where you naturally already feel somewhat safe and relaxed. Because whatever connecting and sustaining is, it totally depends on wise effort. It can't arise out of fear or greed or aversion. It has to be relaxed. And the only intention that really is allowed in a way is that pure interest. Like, what is the nature? What's happening? For its own sake, like just want to connect, just want to sense, feel, know the way it is. And it will lead on this sort of more ordinary egoic level to me being able to be more skillful in whatever place in my life that I bring more of that sustained present moment awareness. But if that's what's driving my practice, it will undermine the practice. Like if I'm practicing in order, this is kind of the standing joke in kind of my world of being a Buddhist meditation teacher, awareness teacher, is, because these days you see mindfulness being taught everywhere. The Pentagon, actually was a former Common Ground person who a long, long time ago moved to Virginia, the suburbs outside of Washington, and he's a really good practitioner. And over the years, he developed a business where he was teaching mindfulness, including to the Pentagon, people in the Pentagon, not the building. And people teach businesses, they teach all kinds of places. And the sort of interesting, sometimes funny is like, well, how is that going to work? Because, will people that, want to do violence, what happens when you train people to connect and sustain in that open way? People are changed. Business people are changed. Military people are changed. Politicians are changed. You and I are changed. That's the whole point. So on the one hand, it does allow you to be more competent at whatever you do. But on the other hand, it changes who you are, the one who wants to be competent, and what you think you want to be competent at. Right? It changes you. So that was always, at least mine, and I think others take, is like, great, let it happen. Because if it's real practice that is getting brought into these different places, then they'll get more competent at strategizing about how to win the war, but they'll also get changed in the process. They'll become, it's sort of like the nature of reality is when the heart really learns how to open, and that trust in being open develops because of the direct effects we're sensing in our lives. So there's a deepening trust. It becomes a refuge, being open and aware, being sensitive. It's like you can't be, once there's enough momentum in that confidence and awareness and openness and being sensitive, then boundaries and categories and compartments don't make sense. So it's like the heart, not all at once generally, right? Slowly, like more doors and windows start to open. And it doesn't make sense to have the other, the people who don't belong in my heart, the people who don't matter. It just stops making sense. It has to, be revealed to the mind. It has to be reflected back how the mind is still keeping a door closed over here, still putting a group of people into a box over there. But when it is revealed, then it's felt directly like, this isn't helpful, this isn't needed, this isn't for my well-being or for anybody's well-being, to throw people out of our heart. Doesn't mean that we don't know who's dangerous or who we need to keep some distance from. It just means we don't have to hate them to take care of ourselves or to take care of people who might be harmed. So we'll keep coming back, but just in terms of homework, and for any of you who want to stay for the optional small groups when we end in about 5 minutes, you might want to just talk about your own, like little testimonials can be so helpful. Times when you had that, again, in Buddhism, that initial skill we sometimes call seclusion, because the mind is secluded from being pushed around by its likes and dislikes and its thoughts about this and that. The endlessness, right? So our normal human situation is the sensitivity of my mind and heart is being impinged upon by endless sense experience, including my thoughts about what I might eat, or my thoughts about what I might see when I get back on the internet. Or so the sense impingement isn't just what I'm seeing and hearing and touching and smelling and tasting. It's also all of our thoughts about sense experience is also a sense impingement. It's like we're touched, literally touched, by sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and sound, whatever one I'm forgetting. And we're also touched by our thoughts about all of those sense experiences. And most of our thoughts involve sensuality, about the five senses, sense experience. That's what we think about mostly. And it's a constant impingement, and each of that touching, then we have thoughts about that touch, and a reaction, a response to that touch, which is another sense impingement. It's endless. And then each one is tugging and pushing and pulling, and that's why we feel the way we feel a lot of the time. And that's why a lot of our effort as human beings is we're looking for a break. So maybe I'll drink a beer or watch something funny, but we're looking for something to soothe us because of the stress and overwhelm from the exposure of being sensitive to all of that, right? So before we can really get a sense of what the heck's going on here, the sort of more existential sense, we need to understand the pleasure and healing of seclusion. And human beings, we've all done this, and this is what I meant by like little testimonials. Whether you stay for the small groups or not, you can be reflecting on this or talking to your other good friends at home about this. How do you take care of your mind? There's a famous teacher from Thailand who died, a couple decades ago, Ajahn Buddhadasa. He was both a scholar and a wonderful meditation practitioner and teacher, Buddhist monk. And he has this great article you can get. It's just like 8 pages. You can download it online. It's called Nibbana for Everyone. And so remember that, Nibbana for Everyone, Ajahn Buddhadasa. But even the title should get it to you. If you don't find it, you can send me an email. And in that, he says something really, I think, astounding and useful. He says, if you already didn't have some way back to the coolness of seclusion, so to have some space or distance from that constant impingement of sense experience, you wouldn't be able to live, right? So we have it, like even deep sleep at night is a little vacation from sense impingement. Eyes still work, ears still work, but in deep sleep we're not hearing or seeing, and evidently not much, if any, thoughts, right? We get a little vacation. When we have a good night's sleep, we feel refreshed. Or when you take a vacation from some aspect of your sense impingement and knit for an hour, or garden for an hour, or brush your dog for 30 minutes, you get a little, and pick the ticks out of your dog, or whatever you have to do, the burrs, you get a little break from whatever else the mind would be pushed around by. Because that activity, it needs to be either because of your chosen attentiveness or just because of the demands of that task. It has to be absorbing. That's the key. To get a flavor of what it is to seclude your mind from the ordinary torments of your habits, mental habits, you need to take up something that either because you're interested, like choosing to be interested in breathing in and breathing out, or the object is naturally interesting, so that your mind isn't doing what it otherwise would do. Otherwise, you're not getting a real vacation, and you're not experiencing what in Buddhism we call seclusion. Because that's why it's such a good word, even though it's a little weird initially, that word seclusion, because it can get wrongly interpreted in terms of like escape. But it's more about, like, absorbing can be a better word, where I'm choosing to be just connected and sustaining with this activity of the present moment. And in doing that, I'm going to get a break from the mind feeling responsible for whatever else that would impinge upon the sensitivity of the heart. I get a break. And what's that break feel like? That's our homework for the next couple of weeks. What does the break from sense impingement feel like? So when we turn inward, if you already know how to do that, or when you train yourself to use a meditation object and to hold your attention by getting interested and learning how to be interested without being tight about it. Interest is more like, not like, ooh. It's really that, it has that receptive vibe to it. And then learn, well, what comes from that? Is that trustworthy? Is it healing? Does the mind naturally want more of that? Oh, well, maybe I'll develop that skill just to be with this and to let go of everything else. So I'll leave it here. A couple announcements before we end. Most of you know this already, but the center for 30 years now, this is our 30th anniversary this 2023, yeah, a long time. And we've operated right from the beginning. We've never charged for any programs, including our residential retreats. We want people to participate whenever it makes sense, regardless of your financial situation, whether you have any money to give. So please keep that in mind and really practice receiving everything the center has to offer as a free gift. Let it land. And then naturally, when it makes sense to you, find a way to give back. Whether you're sending good wishes toward the teachers and the staff and the community, or whether you're contributing money or volunteering your time. And let that also be a cause for happiness for you. So both the receiving of what the center has to offer and any giving that you give, let both be a cause for happiness. And for 30 years, it's worked well enough for us. You know, we operate pretty conservatively, but we do have paid staff. We have this building. We have the retreat center, 83 miles into western Wisconsin from here, that we take care of. We support our teachers, our livelihood. So all of this just comes naturally through people finding their own way. Each person has to figure it out for themselves because everyone's situation is different. And if you have any questions, just contact the center. Any specifics, we can help you out with any of those technical questions if you have any. Good, and then I'll be doing the loving kindness practice group on the 7th a week. What is it? So it's this coming Friday. And I'll be also doing the day-long retreat on the 29th. There's the work retreat last 2 weeks at the retreat center of July. So the 17th through the 21st and the 24th through the 28th, Corey Clementson, a longtime leader and also the construction manager out at the retreat center, is out there doing projects. Still 3 meditations periods a day. Really great community time. So if you can get out there for a couple days or 1 day or 2 weeks, just let us know. And the organizers of people who bring mindfulness into the local prisons are looking for some more people. If you're interested in hearing more about that, you can contact the office. We'll connect you with some of the people who have been doing that work. And also, if you do that work, volunteering in the prisons, we're going to have a practice period out at the retreat center. So all the people leading mindfulness groups can network and do some sitting together. And that's going to be October 5th through 8th. And contact the center if you're interested in that. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention to people, there's a lovely little play going on right now about the young life of the Dalai Lama. It's at Washburn Park. Really great for kids, but for everyone, beautiful music and dancing and masks. It's by a Tibetan society. I don't know the exact name. There is a postcard that was put up, or you can look up Buddha Prince Minneapolis or Buddha Prince Washburn Park and find it. I think it's only going for another week, but it's really lovely.
Thanks for that. Good, so I'm going to pass all of you online over to Lucy if you want to stay for the small groups to have a conversation for 15 minutes. And those in the room, just stay put, and Sandy and Dan and I will organize you into small groups. Otherwise, hope to see you down the road, everyone. Thanks for coming.